The Pod Barber. Coming up on today's show.
People who had survived and either were living with HIV or hepatitis C or bereaved families and partners, they were forced to sign a letter saying that they would not take action against the government in order to receive the exgration money.
Wow.
So it basically just held the whole community at ransom, really. In July, there will be the ministers of the time speaking, and a lot of people have been anticipating this. You know, this summer we're actually going to hear from some of the people who were making those decisions that ultimately all come back to cost. Again, why certain decisions were made or not made to protect people.
You're listening to The Pod Barber. I'm championing the chat, proving conversation is the cure to better mental health and well-being. Meet my guests from all walks of life showing vulnerability and sharing wisdom. Sit in on my chats and be part of reality entertainment. Join the Pod Barber tribe. Subscribe, share and like people. Feel the sonic positivity we're pumping right at you. You, my friends, are not alone.
Who's next, please?
Well, I'll tell you who. We welcome Laurence Woollard to the Pod Barber HQ today. This fine young man is an advocate fighting for justice, asking the questions to expose medical paternalism, and an activist for haemophiliacs, the chronic condition that he suffers from. Determined to target the truth and to hold accountable the powers that be, to give voice and unearth the truth. The epitome of positive movement for human rights. I can't wait to learn more, be educated and listen to Laurence and discover what it's like to be a haemophiliac, all he has to share, and the importance of his message. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks so much, Mick. It's an absolute privilege to be here.
That's grand. So I've got you a little noodle here, son. So here goes. I'm so excited to have you here, bringing your knowledge from your niche with no fear. See, my main man, Laurence, is a haemophiliac, fighting hard for justice, paying forward, he's paying back. For this illness and all that suffer his chronic condition inspired him, his whole family, to be active, to pursue the mission. Laurence Woollard, you push the government to act. With you as the speaker, there's a positive impact. I'm not sure how to contain your excitement. Now you're in the pod, this space will be enlightened.
Oh, yes. I love that. Thank you so much. You know what? I've been anticipating that for weeks. So since you did give me a clue of what you were doing. So I really, really appreciate that. Really nice. Thank you.
I'm glad you liked it, mate. It was a pleasure writing it for you. So I know how busy you are. How have you been keeping in this last year or so, man?
I'm good, Mick. Yeah, thanks so much for asking. It's, I'm sure like everybody, it's been a bit of a wild ride. With some ups and downs, but I always feel very privileged that I have a very supportive family, and in particular, I'm 31. I still live with my parents, who I absolutely love dearly and have a very close relationship with, particularly my mum. Although sometimes we're a bit too close and it gets heated. But so I've been really privileged to have them, around me, and obviously my girlfriend as well. But I am pleased to announce to the world that I will be moving out this Friday, believe it or not. So I'm finally, it's been a long time coming, but we're finally there. So
bags are packed, contracts are exchanged,
all that.
So anyway, obviously you're moving out. That's brilliant. Like at 31, it's not an unusual thing these days, I don't think.
No, I heard a stat the other day. I think it's around 25% of 30 to 34-year-olds are still, don't exactly quote me on that, but around 25% are still living with their parents, which I think, I guess also just kind of reflects the time.
At a young age now, let's face it, how many young dudes get their first job and get a Mercedes SLK on finance? You should have bought a house. They go up in price, cars go down. So I suppose it's just because we sit there looking at all the material crap that we want, whereas we need a material thing to live in.
Yeah, right.
And they're bloody expensive, especially in this postcode.
Yeah.
Is that why you've moved to Haverhill?
No.
Oh, no, you're agent.
So. But that's why,
Where are you living in? Where are you going to be moving to?
Wixo.
Wixo, where's that?
It's like it's about 10 minutes outside of Haverhill. It's a very quiet village with, fairly more sort of the mature audience around there. But I don't know how that's going to be come the football. I'm a little bit nervous about that because I'm quite a vocal guy, and it's warm. The windows will be open. Do you know what I mean?
Shouting. Is there a pub?
There isn't, believe it or not, but there is
there'll be loads of people doing garden parties.
Well, hopefully. That'd be nice if they are.
Let's hear a little bit more about your history. the man that sits here today, take it back sort of, not your first memory of being born or anything, but let's go to there, because with your condition, it's a condition that's from birth, isn't it? So I want to know what it was like to be born Laurence Woollard. Give us that sort of brief bit from the start.
Yeah, definitely. And as you say, it's congenital. So, and again, I feel quite fortunate to have the opportunity to actually come on and speak a bit more about it. As you said, Mick, I live with, it's a rare bleeding disorder called haemophilia, and it's mainly diagnosed at birth. So it means that there's X-linked recessive. So there's a genetic mutation on the factor 8 or factor 9 gene, and that's haemophilia A and B respectively. They're the two main types of haemophilia. And it's really, in sort of layman's terms, it's very much prone to spontaneous and trauma bleeding. So I'm deficient in, for me, the clotting factor 8. So, the kind of typical symptoms of that and the main bleeding is really within the tissues, muscles and the joints. But I think before I get to that, it's carried through the mother and predominantly passed on to the son, so males, and only really males have haemophilia, but there are females as well, and I'm sure we'll touch on that a bit later. So in terms of my own family, we have a family history of haemophilia, and there's around 70% of people living with haemophilia have a known family history. So my grandfather, so my mum's dad, had haemophilia, and he had a severe form of haemophilia, and that's, you can sort of identify with that in some of the old photos of him, quite a swollen knee. So as I was saying, most of the bleeds occur, within the joints, and they're predominantly ankles, elbows and knees. So, when I see old photos of Grandad, it's quite interesting seeing, quite big, swollen, arthritic, knees.
You know what you're looking for now.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that when you get that sort of repetitive bleeding within the joint spaces, that can lead to sort of joint degradation, severe joint disease, and that forms into haemophilic arthropathy. So obviously that has huge consequences around quality of life, health-related quality of life, mobility, pain management's massive, and again I'm sure we'll touch on that. So my mum was obviously aware that she was tested in her early 20s, so she was aware that she was a carrier of the genetic mutation. So my older brother Andrew, so we're 2 years apart, 3 brothers, so he was first diagnosed, and then my middle brother as well. And there's normally, when you do the sort of XYs and when you kind of go through the map, it's a 50-50 chance that, sons would be diagnosed with haemophilia. So all 3 of us, we got the full,
So 100%.
100%, yeah, exactly.
Percentage doesn't fall in one house, it falls across the board.
There we go. So, but the way I look at it, Mick, as well, though, is that it's sort of better to be in it together than one of us. We've had the experiences when we were younger, with some of the families that we met, and, you'd only have, say, one of the boys amongst other brothers and sisters only living with the condition. And I think it's probably really challenging when you've got siblings that can't really relate, whereas at least all 3 of us were on the journey together. So
there was the pact of you, the 3 musketeers.
3 musketeers, yeah, exactly. So I think Mum knew, obviously, with Andrew being the firstborn, it was really, around sort of experiential learning with it, whilst also having, my nan and granddad there as a support mechanism. And then obviously with Jonathan, they could sort of take what they learned from Andrew and apply that to Jonathan. And then when I came along, it was just...
They'd worked it out by then.
Yeah. Although, again, that has, I think for any genetic condition, really, it sort of has its consequences as well. So I reflect now that, and what we see certainly within conditions like haemophilia, that more sort of personalised approach to management, and that even though all 3 of us have the same clinical phenotype of bleeding, actually we are all very different and all need to be managed differently in terms of care and treatment. So, it didn't necessarily mean everything applied the same, and that's evident as well just in terms of our outcomes today around, our joint status and health.
So just to sort of dial a little bit further into that, so you had these 2 older brothers, you become aware of the world at, sort of 3, 4, but as you walked through that with joint pains with this fear of bleeds and stuff like that, having seen different episodes from Andrew and Jonathan at different points, you don't all just timingly have a bleed. A chronic illness just hips in. Yeah. What was your sort of experience?
Yeah, 100%. So I think first point is massive caregiver impact, for mum and dad. And I guess, the interesting question I always say, and I still ask them, I'm like, if you knew there was the potential of having another child living with the condition, what on earth possessed you? You know what I mean? And, but I think as far as they understood at the time anyway, in terms of the management of the condition, they felt fairly supported that we would have, good life fulfillment with the treatment and with advances in treatment at the time as well. So certainly that didn't prevent it. And also the other argument is that should never prevent you from having the family that you want, And so I think one, obviously the caregiver impact, and mum and dad make huge sacrifices for us as a family. My mum was working in the banking sector, but when she had Andrew, she moved to become a school dinner lady.
Wicked.
To then obviously be able to oversee him. And then, all three of us went to the same primary school. So mum kind of went from being a dinner lady to then being a teaching assistant. So she actually stayed at the same primary school for over 20 years just to see all us through.
That's so cool.
Into secondary school.
What a lovely thing to be able to do.
Unbelievable. And then my dad as well, he became self-employed. So he does educational workshops in schools around rocks, fossils and dinosaurs. They call him the Dino Man.
I'm so excited. Why didn't I ask him in here?
You should have got Dad in it.
He's coming.
He's unbelievable. He's amazing. He's got a crocodile skull in the Natural History Museum that he found. It's unreal. So cool. Unreal. So, even with Dad, obviously he went self-employed, and that was massive because obviously while mum was at school with us or whatever, that, if one of us had a bleed or was going through quite a traumatic experience, he would be able to stay home. So massive commitment.
Huge
and I think
support.
This comes, this then goes on the whole conversation around state support and how the state need to be there to look after the most vulnerable. And mum and dad, there's no way they would have been able to give us the level of support that we required if it wasn't for state provision, and disability benefits, because it enabled them like that. If we were having to stay at home, dad couldn't work, or vice versa, mum couldn't work.
I think to butt in, I think, there's one thing that we can sort of look at currently right now that if you don't understand that in itself, look at the way that COVID has meant furlough. So to support people that simply cannot do something, and we can all sit there and go, do you know what? It didn't matter what was going on in my life. I had this, I had that. And I needed extra support.
100%.
Brilliant that there's that facilitation there. We will go into that a bit later.
Definitely. And I think that's definitely the key point around caregiver impact. But I think certainly when I reflect on my childhood, there were some really dark times, and I think particularly at that point where, the sort of standard of care, the standard of therapy is regular prophylaxis by intravenous infusion. So, mix a vial and then into the arm. And that can vary depending on that sort of personalised approach. But it's normally somebody living with severe haemophilia, for instance, would treat every other day or, twice a week, depending on the treatment. But obviously back then, mum and dad didn't have the ability to infuse us. So if we had a bleed, we would have to go to the hospital. And I think mum always says, typically the bleed would come on at evening when we're in the bath, when it was warm, and we'd start feeling the sort of bleed or the kind of joint space increasing and that leading to the pain. And that bleed might have occurred earlier in the day and it was just building up over several hours. So it was those evenings of having to kind of go to the local hospital where they didn't have the specialism. So you're seeing sort of locum doctors and, all that time from when the onset of the bleed to then actually getting to the hospital to then the doctors questioning mum and dad about the history of the condition, what's going, mum's there going, just put the treatment in.
And then we'll talk about that.
Then we'll talk about it. So there's lots of experience like that. And all that all led to that quite traumatic phase of dark experiences of sort of being in hospital and stuff. But I think by the time that we were actually able to start self-injecting, which was around 10, 11 years old, that whole dynamic sort of changed. It's like just massive responsibility. But I think that goes to the point, though, that any chronic condition, for instance, and I appreciate that it might be nuances where you've got life-limiting conditions where maybe there's no treatment. But certainly when I look at the perspective of haemophilia and the treatment management at the time, that shouldn't stop anybody having the family that they want.
Yeah.
But there needs to be the level of support. And like I say, mum and dad, none of us would be in the position that we are today without that, increased support that they had.
Yeah, and it's getting better and better.
Times. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously the childhood, you had that shared experience with your bros.
Yeah.
You being the youngest one, so you almost had that
guidance.
You could,
totally.
could sort of share and impart that little bit of wisdom as it came, support one another. But yeah, it's definitely traumatic, isn't it? It's one of those things, and going into the hospital scenario, we can all still relate to that.
Yes, yeah, definitely, yeah.
Because we all go in, even if you're, I've got an autoimmune thing. So when you go in and you have to keep on reliving the tale, then I suppose innovation can come in the sense of, I don't need to keep on going on and on and on to each and every professional that I can't see the same one every time. There should be something a little bit smarter, because it's just a waste of time, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that's where, obviously, for again, haemophilia being one of the more sort of larger and also advanced rare diseases, that and advanced in terms of the way that the condition is managed. We've had the existence of comprehensive care teams now, for some decades. So even then, we had a specialist centre in London, in Whitechapel. And again, I remember those times of, I used to actually be really scared of Whitechapel. And it certainly wasn't gentrified like it is today. And, being picked up from school when we used to have our appointments in like the evening, and particularly at the winter times. And I remember when we would drive through, Whitechapel, Mick, and I used to put my jacket because I couldn't stand looking at straight. And I love it now. I absolutely love going up there, and it's crazy really. But I think, again, it's just, I think there's a lot of, for all three of us, and obviously as a family, that's a lot to manage. Like the level of maturity as children that is expected of you. You can't overlook that.
You have to grow up quickly in certain scenarios.
And
actually, there's a lot of people that don't have anything particularly special in the sense of lived experience. But then you can get that from the visceral experience by, again, just caring.
Yeah, and being, exactly. And
being more compassionate.
Yeah, 100%.
So to dilute the older ways, I think it's probably important to then fill the cup back up with something a bit more potent as a positive advocate for your wider society, the street that you live in. The person that's hobbling around a little bit, or find out.
Ask
why.
those questions. Yeah, I was just going to say. Yeah,
just 100%. Ask them, man.
Yeah,
how you doing, pal?
Totally.
It's like with haemophilia. I didn't know. Loads of people don't know.
Yeah.
So
but it's also because you're open-minded to ask those questions, though, when we're together. And obviously, how much I respect and appreciate that. So when you're given that space, it's great to be able to share and like, I learn from you, and I hope, I'd like to think that you learn from me. So it's, that kind of two-way convo. I think really where the significant part, though, particularly of that sort of journey, as it were, though, is hitting the transition phase and becoming a teenager and the height of puberty, and it's still today, I think the challenge is where you got healthcare services that aren't designed for young people. They're designed for pediatrics and they're designed for adults. But there's a whole bit in the middle where we recognise the sort of social, biological and emotional changes of that sort of 10 to 24 now that some argue is kind of defined as adolescence. It's hugely significant, and particularly where you're making decisions that are potentially going to have huge consequences on your future well-being and welfare. But I'll be totally honest though, Mick, it's hard. Again, when I sort of go back and think about it and also see, young people living my condition today, it's hard when, you've jumped off the school bus, you've just got home, you've ripped your bag off, you had a snack, and then your mates come knocking round with a football. And they're like, do you want to go around the park?
You're coming out to play.
And you're like, it doesn't even go into your mind about, I haven't had a treatment this morning, so I haven't got optimal coverage. I'm going to go over to the field, play about an hour and a half of football, which might then spark a joint bleed. And then I'm going to pay for that this evening by having then to have to go to hospital, get treated, and then be off my feet for several days. Because ultimately that's the implications of having a spontaneous or traumatic bleed, is that you are essentially having to, do no weight bearing and you might be in bed or again, just off your feet for several days, if not weeks. So it's really difficult, I think, to support a young person to identify with, if you make this step now, that may cause you implications. Because, there's good evidence that shows that even one joint bleed can cause changes within the joint structure. Again, I think that's why you have to embed those behaviours very early on, which is where you need the education during childhood. You need that level of support. But again, whilst also recognising that, still, that's a lot of responsibility to put on a young person's shoulders.
Yeah. So why not share it and put it on all of them and let the whole community take a little bit of the weight? Just a general awareness. I think the thing is, if you can get the formula that kids are just more open-minded, it's like anything. It's like a good conversation. It's the art of a good listen.
Yeah.
And with that open-mindedness, isn't it? So if we can start to try and challenge youngsters to spend a bit of time on that, even if you weave it in and out of Call of Duty Modern Warfare, do you know what I mean? There's an advert that pops up like, just think about the guy that you're playing. Whatever. There must be some ways to sort of thread that in. And but I mean, that's the solutions that we need to find for everything. Totally, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult.
Yeah. But that's where you get those support groups, isn't it? And obviously the charities, but, the different support groups that are able to sort of put activities on or put initiatives on, and also interventions through the clinic. But again, all of that needs funding.
Yeah.
All of that needs the right people behind those initiatives to make it a success. And it also needs co-production. It also needs young people involved in the design and delivery of those programs, so they're actually meaningful. And often that gets overlooked again by the people that are,
because they don't trust
doing it right. So I think, the other point is, don't forget the caregivers there. My brother's a teacher, and obviously we often, without sharing any private details, of course, but we often talk about, his experiences when he's in the classroom at both a primary and secondary school level, and some children that are a little bit more difficult than others. Ultimately, it still goes back to the caregivers, and the caregivers influencing children in terms of their behaviour and again, their learning and whatever it might be. So the caregivers, again, need that level of support to be able to support their children during that growth. And that personal development. So I think, again, whilst we're, again, thinking about young people, we also can't forget the caregivers as a part of that.
As a community.
100%. At a clinical level, though, you also need the right people in place to support you. And we recently had in the UK a service review that was published last year looking at all the comprehensive care centres and haemophilia treatment centres for the condition. And where we've, over the past several years, put so much emphasis into physical activity for people living with haemophilia, because that supports, strengthening joints and muscles, which is really, really important. And obviously just good, healthy, lifestyles. Where we put so much emphasis into that, you also need physios there. You need physios in place to support with joint movement and rehabilitation, whatever it might be. But again, in this service review, over half of comprehensive care centres do not have a designated physio.
Do you know what? That's just rubbish.
And then also in terms of, mental health need and, obviously thinking about some of those childhood experiences and the implications around, mental well-being,
therapy,
anxiety, depression. Exactly. And I think the last systematic review I looked at, 2 out of 5 people living with haemophilia have anxiety or depression. Over 3/4 of centres in the UK have no named psychologist. And in London we have around, I think there's about 7 comprehensive care centres in London alone for haemophilia and other bleeding disorders. What I don't want to forget in this conversation is other inherited bleeding disorders that come under that umbrella. So obviously they're not just seeing people living with haemophilia. There's von Willebrand's and other rarer types of disorders. But in London, where we have 7 comprehensive care centres, there's 1 family therapist to serve that whole network. And we've got to remember, people outside of London, like me, are coming into those centres because they're obviously advanced centres and, you've grown up visiting them. So lots of people from afar across the country where they're not happy with the level of care they might be receiving where they live, might come into London.
Yeah, because they can see on TripAdvisor the reviews. They're even better. They've got 4.5 stars from 500 check-ins.
Exactly. So I think that just speaks, I really appreciate the opportunity to share that, because that just speaks to the problem. How can we keep going on about what good physio looks like when actually you haven't even got the service provision available to you?
I mean, on that note, I will always recommend living with the most up-to-date physical application on a regular basis. That's now supported by modern medicine. That's now supported by science, well-being. So basically, your therapies, everything, it's not just one thing. It's
that whole holistic approach.
It's a connectivity, totally, but also the thing is, it's when you go through these scenarios, you might have just been through, you broke your back, you've done your shoulder. You might not be a lifelong condition, but you basically get dropped into that world of one day, things were great, and all of a sudden it's not. You've now got to rehabilitate. You've now got to somehow get over I can't do this.
Yeah.
So you can empathise if that's happened to you. I'm sure most people by 40, 50, we've had something like this happen to us. But what you do learn is that the system is pretty cracked, because they don't communicate within themselves. There's loads of charlatans. There's people not staying up to date with their education because nothing's absolute. So things change, things innovate. And that's the whole point of it. But if you're having the conversation from the people that are suffering, that are going through these conditions, living with these conditions, or albeit an accident or something like that, what you do realise is it's not just one thing. It could be a plant-based medicine with a mindful approach, with the support of a community and charity-run things. But there's a general message that comes from all of them, but there is a communication, so they all understand what they're doing. But the box-ticking exercise that comes from the very top has got to change, isn't it?
And that's what you say about, what I certainly take from that is that sort of contributing to the knowledge base. And there's, for haemophilia, we have lots of research always ongoing, but also it speaks to the importance of that collaboration, and particularly in the sort of chronic disease, rare disease field. Obviously, the implications of living with a condition like haemophilia can lead to disability. So it's really important that we promote collaboration with other disease areas, but also campaign groups related to issues like accessibility, for instance. So I think one, yes, adding to the knowledge base, but two, also really important, about collaboration.
One last little bit on that.
Yeah.
You look after yourself, don't you?
So now I really try to do. Yeah, I really try to now. Yeah,
you eat your brain porridge every morning.
I do. Yeah,
you do it, you're pumping your guns up.
Well, to be honest, I have a gluten-free bagel. That's salmon? My go-to. No salmon. No, just go like classic jam. But I've made a few changes recently, definitely, and I think it actually speaks to the sport piece. So we have a bit of a poster child in the haemophilia community, and his name's Alex Dowsett. So he rides. He's a professional road cyclist, and he rides for currently Israel Startup Nation and the UCI.
I know about him.
Yeah. So I think his last, the gyro's just happened, and I think he had to pull out because of a stomach problem. But the last gyro, which was last year because of COVID, he won stage 8, which was like phenomenal.
Can I just add? He competes against normal able bodies. He doesn't do anything on the basis of a different set of rules or competition.
No.
He is racing versus normal able-bodied people.
100%. So he has severe haemophilia.
Yep.
And we actually grew up with each other. Like we were about 15 minutes down the road in where we used to live in Essex. So, he's been really important for the global community to demonstrate what is possible with the right care, provision and support, and obviously optimal treatment and optimal management, that anybody living with a condition like haemophilia can have an exceptionally good quality of life.
There it is.
And more to the point, achieve what they want to do in life, and that's really what it comes down to as a person, as an individual. What is it that you want to do in life, and how, as the care system, can we ensure and support you to get there, whether or not you live with haemophilia? So I think he's been massive to showcase that, while also recognising, Mick, that it's not just all about sport. There's lots of different vocations.
Absolutely.
That anybody living with any form of condition can, hopefully apply themselves to and become a success in their own right. But I think for Alex, it's just been a really important showcase of particularly where we have huge disparities. Not only do we have disparities in terms of treatment in the UK, but huge disparities across the world. I think it's great for someone like Alex to have used haemophilia as his catalyst.
The thing I really like about cycling, and this goes to show you, to perform in cycling of any disciplines, what you end up with is looking at a dialed in detail. They microscope everything because they're looking to hammer out 1%. We can work on 1%, and it could be the weight of the bike, the taking a cog off, or the moment that we apply electrolytes or food, and it's very personalised. So what it does is it magnifies how important personalisation to improve on the small details.
But as you said, that personalisation comes down to every aspect of life, and obviously particularly in terms of treatment management, and that message has really been sounded over the past few years around individualising treatment. But what Alex also shows though is that, and I think something you just missed in your amazing summary there, is the inner strength and inner determination, Mick. Not everybody has that. They have it to some extent, but or maybe that's wrong. Maybe they do. They just need to find. You need support to find it, don't you? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah,
I totally agree.
Because we'd be getting to that. Because the point is, it's because he's looking at high level, so naturally he has to wear his heart closer to his sleeve because he's got to dig down deep.
100%.
Whereas somebody that wants to go into other fields of professions, it's not a focal point of necessarily a skill set. However, with the attribute of then going, right, well, if I'm going to be the best I'm going to be at anything, if I look after myself in my body and in my mind,
you can apply yourself.
You can apply that.
Yeah.
But you don't have to go and do smash out 100k runs or bike rides. But what you could do is you could make sure that you're pushing to get better joint arthropy, is that the word?
Yeah,
and stuff.
But
that goes if you're just normal able body. Some people can't even run without running in pain. It's so dependent. Exercise, you have to do it. I don't think that there's a single person that can say I don't do it. Breathing techniques, I think, are so vital, and they're going to become more and more and more talked about because they have such a massive effect on mindfulness, on that stillness, that calmness, about accessing sort of the innate pharmacy that we've all got tucked away there. The parasympathetic nervous system, all of these kind of things. And then you add in therapy for the trauma that we all suffer, because we all bloody suffer at some point. So there's the different prongs, hydration, nutrition. Why not? Why not do a bit of everything?
No, I agree. And I think you're also seeing as well some of these, personal trainers and gyms in terms of accessible physical exercise as well. And also the, in terms of technology, and e-health and what that's enabled people to do from home, not just obviously during COVID, pre-COVID as well. But what I would say though, Mick, is that, and the link there with Alex is that, I started to road bike and I really picked it up last summer. And obviously, I've seen a huge difference in terms, I was actually going through a real experience with my left ankle. And something I sort of forgot to mention was that, 16 was really pivotal because I had developed chronic joint disease in my right ankle and had to have surgery. So they've actually fused my right ankle to stop it from moving because of the pain that I was experiencing. And my left ankle sort of got to that point where I was as a teenager. So I was going through a real, real difficult phase, but the biking has changed the dynamic, on top of other things, that I, for instance, I take anti-inflammatories and I've increased, my treatment. So we've really optimized and individualized my treatment. So again, that whole piece really coming together that has made massive improvement, but damn, it's expensive.
Yep.
And I think, again, it's all great, all good and well, I think, for us, as you said, to really promote exercise and sport. But, even with football, you still need the boots, you still need the gear. And with the biking, I mean, it's extraordinary how much I've had to lay out,
Because you want one of those really good ones.
Come on. And this is actually as a side point, this is actually hilarious. So when I was on my rubbish mountain bike, I remember going around, some of the roads in Saffron Walden, and when you see the guys, in the full lycra glasses, on the road bike, I never used to get hello. I always used to say hey as a fellow biker, on the road. I always used to say, never used to get hello. The first day I went out on my road bike in the full gear, colour themed.
You're in.
I had 5 hellos.
Yeah.
Like mad, you know. So it is like a community, isn't it? But I think just, you know, again, that speaks to that provision again, isn't it? Particularly through some of the charities and the groups about we also need to support people to get actually, you know...
encouragement and just welcoming.
Totally. Like, just the right gear to go out.
You know what? Some people have got like probably 10, 20 grand's worth of bikes sitting on their walls. Shed a bit of lycra to someone that might need it. You could split that one outfit over about 4 of Laurence's. Give him a new outfit. He likes the really strong pink. I do as well. Love a bit of pink. You talked about the ladder. Well, I wrote it down as ladder, but it's about the fact that you can improve, you can go up, you can go down. So the idea in life is that we go through more of a normal path. But if anything, you want to sort of climb up it a bit, you know, and it's relatable with mental health because that can really spike for some people. And that's those massive roller coasters of troughs and peaks, whereas you kind of want to bring it back to a middle. And I think with good attitudes and better understanding and better support, available equipment, shared equipment, charitable thing, if we start to pre-cover from all of these things by getting people fit, getting kids fit, getting them healthy. You've got to have your power hour, just getting people on it. And it takes a little while, but once you've been doing that, you look at the civilizations that do that, it's their daily bread, mate. It's what they do. And that's inclusive and it doesn't cost a lot to have a good attitude.
Yeah, and
if anything, it's free.
And I really appreciate that. And I think that speaks to like a bigger idea, actually. And this is quite a conceptual idea. And you mentioned the ladder. There's actually something that's been sort of tested in diabetes called the empowerment ladder when they're looking at sort of leadership. And it is very much that sort of visual of going from someone who, you know, is a passive recipient of their care, you know, that early phase around developing the skill set to self-manage, to ultimately becoming, you know, at a societal level, somebody who is very much an advocate, you know, and speaks.
We need an app. You basically just need an app.
No, see, we could do a whole podcast on that though, Mick, like around the advantages and disadvantages of e-health and digital, you know. So I wouldn't want to take you off on that. But yeah, I think we can't forget the importance of peer validation.
Oh, 100%.
In every aspect, isn't it? And again, that provision of peer validation to be able to learn from others, isn't it? And build that knowledge base together rather than always relying on a screen.
But
you know,
to validate on a daily practice, a guided tap-in, maybe there's a solution there. Anyway, but you're right. It's a side subject. So you've got a fused ankle. Would that procedure still be current now?
It is, yeah, and it's still like...
Because it seems a bit savage to me.
You know, and it is, like, it feels really archaic, doesn't it? But it's still one of the main procedures. And obviously, even over the past couple of years, started contemplating having my left one done to take away that daily pain and obviously mobility and walking and everything. Again, it speaks to, you know, at that sort of community level about anybody living with chronic pain, whether you have a condition or not, waking up in the morning and having that underlying pain, like it has huge significances on that whole day ahead of you. You know what I mean? So I think when you get to that point where you're like, I can't take this any longer, I need an intervention. But obviously, again, I've been in a position to enable myself to improve the outcomes of my ankle and obviously overall well-being. So
and through more holistic.
More holistic. Yeah, definitely. But obviously also from sort of, you know, medical intervention as well. Like I couldn't, you know, I take anti-inflammatories every day. You know, I take the highest dose of anti-inflammatories. I take, you know, antidepressants for, you know, anxiety. And, you know, I obviously take my vitamins, you know, along with my treatment. So there's a whole piece there, isn't it? There is a package there.
It's a care package.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's personalised to you.
Exactly. And, you know, right now, you know, I feel really good and it seems to be working.
Do you know what,
I don't want to get knocked off of that.
No.
Yeah.
I mean, you become anxious about the returning anxiety.
Yeah, and I think there's a cycle there, isn't it? And 100%, like, and you know, and that's not to say I haven't been offered psychological support. And actually, props to my treatment centre in London, in Whitechapel, they've actually started over the past year, and obviously it's been a knock-on effect of COVID as well, but their own sort of independent psychological intervention of a group there led by a lady called Christina Burgess. So there are centres that are trying to adopt, different support mechanisms for their patient community. And I have been offered that service. I think, there's a couple of things, Mick, around that, about am I in a mental space to go there yet? Because there's some things that are going to be brought up in there that... Yep. I will also need personal support for. Do you know what I mean? Like when you start going to those places, isn't it?
It's like, hard. Therapy is hard work.
It's hard work, and I think with everything going on, and again, this is why I look to people like you, the responsibility of yourself and your family. I think when I think about what's going on in my own personal and professional life, to sort of go there right now, I'm not ready for that.
You've got to book it in the diary.
Did you think so?
You've got to write it down in the journal. I'm going to go and open up some old wounds and be prepared to deal with what might come.
100%. But I think, and I'm obviously not, what I don't want to do there is advocate medication. For some people it's not for them or it doesn't work. I think for me, obviously for the time being, it was an intervention that was necessary. And obviously I'm totally open-minded to pursuing other alternatives, isn't it? To again, like improve my own mental well-being. So it just has to be at the right time.
Yeah, I think that's, well said, actually. I think that's really important because it is your story. It's your way of feeling. You know what you've got. You know what you want to achieve. And actually, to risk achieving what you're trying to do professionally, we've mentioned the fact that you're moving out, 31 years old. What a great thing that is. But also the responsibility you've got because you bear the struggle of other people because you're a voice for them. So all of a sudden, for you to have to be so selfish, as in to look at yourself and to go, right, I'm ready to deal with some of those trauma rings in the tree of Laurence. You have got to kind of sort of plan that, but you're somebody currently who right now emits the most amazing energy, and actually to tilt you from that, it would be risky, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
because
100%.
You don't know
what that's going to end.
Because let's face it, therapy, for those who haven't yet gone through it, it isn't a case of you just going in, sitting there and getting it off your chest and it's okay. You open up things, catalogues for trauma, the body, especially from childhood, retains them in places that you don't, they're hidden.
Yeah,
so you go into a shutdown mode. So you might not know what you're going to uncover.
The unknowns, yeah.
And that's where you have to appreciate that going through some sort of therapy is bloody hard work.
Yeah.
And you need to prepare yourself for that. Preparedness and a little wisdom in those younger years to have a constant conversation, a constant purging throughout the 10 to 24, those adolescent years. Just that little help group, like an AA club, as it were, a weekly check-in or a open conversation in your WhatsApp group or whatever it might be, that would probably lead to being a less traumatic
because of that support and that peer support
download in the future. So another
100%,
solution is to find those little taps to keep on just turning it.
Totally. But there's two points there though, Mick. I think one, I know that there's people around me and people I interact with both personal and professional ways that would be a part of that story. So I think there's also a bit of apprehension there that if I'm going to start opening up, those are going to become part of that story and I'm going to have to deal with them face to face when that comes up. And I'm not ready for that because that potentially is going to lead to challenges in those relationships. I think that's the first point. And then secondly, I think what's sort of remarkable really is that, and obviously I'm not alone here, there's a lot of people like me in our particular age and demographic that are living with joint mobilities as a result of legacy of care. And even today, where people are still being suboptimally treated, aspects of me around my joints, for instance, this didn't have to happen if they treated us right. So it's the legacy of that care that has resulted in me having to rely on more of the state and the services.
Nip it in the bud.
Whereas if they intervened earlier and actually there was pathways and there was treatment that was actually optimal rather than constantly treating to a minimum because of cost.
Yeah.
Actually, I wouldn't be sitting here today
also, it would save
talking
money
about
in the long
that. A part of, particularly over the past couple of years, and thinking about the psychosocial support has been the Infected Blood Enquiry. And, you know, hopefully we're going to have an opportunity to talk about it.
We're definitely going to go to there. We'd got up to your ankle operation, which...
And just to say that, Mick, actually, you know, I had to wear a boot, a plastic boot. So first of all, what I will say is I had a paediatric physician who was dealing with my ankle called Mark Patterson, and he was incredible. You know, again, mum or dad would take me up to London, normally be after school. You can imagine the sort of pain and the experiences I was going through at that height of the teenage years. He was incredible. Like, he was so sensitive to the situation, and he wouldn't talk to dad. He would talk to me.
Yeah, man.
You know, he would ask me the questions. He would ask how I was feeling. He'd ask what I wanted, you know, and what did I want over the coming years. So the amount of respect that he showed me, considering his position, he was one of the leading consultants at the time. And, you know, it was only recently I heard that he passed away of cancer. I couldn't believe it. You know, and you think a man like that had given his whole life to helping young people. So he was remarkable in that phase, but also in terms of the school environment as well. You know, I was having to walk around with like a plastic brace. You know, that's hard to deal with if, you know, again, if you don't have that strong friendships and that level of support running through those particular years, you know, is so necessary. Yeah. So, I mean, one of my learnings though was definitely that classic quote of like, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer. You know, I did that from the beginning. That certainly helped. Obviously, I had massive support from my brother who's in the upper year, and, you know, he was, again, obviously really supportive in all his friends. I think my last point, and also just thinking about the house move, Mick. So when I was sort of going into year 7 and year 8, I'd put on quite a bit of weight, and that was as a result of my ankle. You know, I was going through a lot of challenges with the ankle, and my brother actually bought Rocky. The first Rocky, right, for me. Cow, that's it. And you know what? That changed the game, that film. Unbelievable. And like to this day, like every time I'm like, what's your favourite film? The Rocky discography, except number 5 because it was awful, but the Rocky discography totally changed the game for me. And I was thinking about my, obviously, you know, I'm fortunate enough, I'm going to have a little bit of a study in the new place. And I've already, you know, thought I'm going to get the poster. 100% going to get a framed poster. Yeah,
get
like,
your brother
unbelievable.
Yeah. You went on to study high level education music.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
How did you find university?
Yeah, no, I think again, I think sort of music ran in the family. I know my granddad used to sing a lot. Where sport wasn't as accessible for me because of what was going on at the time, I turned to music. You know, I was doing drama as well, like amateur, you know, dramatics, but it was really music. And unfortunately for my parents, it was the drums. So I was, you can imagine. So it was actually just through that and through my tutor that I had the opportunity to move to Brighton to actually go and study. So it was more around, you know, sort of music business and contemporary music. But again, that was my outlet to express myself where I couldn't otherwise. So, and it was actually probably the best time. Like, obviously, don't tell my consultant this, particularly in like freshers year, because we were going out so much. I was treating so much. I had the best protection I think I've ever had. So I was like, I'm going out tonight. I better be careful. Bop, you know, treat myself, you know, raise my clotting levels, you know. Again, you know, I sort of look at people again like Alex, where it's like, you know, he used haemophilia as a catalyst, you know, to succeed and do what he has. And it was very much the same. Like, I was really motivated down in Brighton, and, you know, I really wanted to make a success of what I was doing. And it took a lot of graft. And I actually worked in HMV for like 18 months. And I was doing lots of internships, and then, you know, had the opportunity, thanks to a guy called Danny Roberts, who got me an internship at a music publisher. And I absolutely loved it. And I worked in Richmond. I moved to London for a couple of years. You know, and it was, you know, really eye-opening for me. But I think, again, this is what you often find in sort of advocacy. I found myself settled to a point where when my treatment centre asked me to become a patient representative for the centre, and that there was an evening going on in central London where, you know, they were inviting patient community to come together. It was sort of an educational thing as well as a social opportunity. That was it. Like, that was the spark, that one event. You know, and I remember travelling from Richmond direct into Central to go there, and it just changed everything, because it just opened my eyes. I was like, I'm actually really interested in my own disease. Actually, this is fascinating.
So you just
why don't I know this
straight away?
That was it, and it came to I worked in music publishing. I moved to the record side in High Street, Kensington. I wasn't vibing it. It was, you just become part of the cog. And I was doing a lot of volunteering then and, supporting, especially, again, young people and the children activities and trying to get involved in different initiatives. And then, I was offered the opportunity to move to Brussels and actually go and work for a kind of a central patient advocacy organisation. And I was just like, that was it. Moved out of my place, quit my job. And went to Brussels for a few months. So it's incredible. It's like, again, opening that door, isn't it?
You were putting yourself
open,
into the place, weren't you? You were putting yourself out there. You got a whiff of something. The sixth sense, the internal compass led you somewhere. And you were open.
Yeah, and I think it's more as well. Like, I guess in the sort of the day job side, I didn't feel like I was really having much social impact or influence. I was just making a lot of money for the the mogul that ran the company. So, and I think I was obviously seeing actually the level of support, level of help that I could make in the voluntary side of things. So I think that was more for me to say, why do I want to carry on in this trajectory? Actually, there's something in this where I see a lot of opportunity around gaps and needs for people like me. There's something I really want to do here. And again, it comes back to that support. You have to have the support there. I went from, a good professional career back to an internship, essentially, with added financial support through the patient organisation. Again, without that mechanism to make it happen, there's no way I could do it. And even just to go into the Brussels bubble for a few months, I lived at a converted nunnery. So there was like 30 of us, like all different Europeans. Unbelievable experience. Amazing. And the best, if I may, Nick, the best story probably was that it happened during Brexit.
Right, okay.
So the Brexit vote happened while I was living in Brussels, right? And I was the only Brit in this whole nunnery, okay? I remember the morning waking up and my brother had messaged, right? My brother said, we're out. Yeah. And I remember walking down and it was you imagine it, it's a bit like Harry Potter, like it was a huge hall, massive kitchen, where the cook would be doing it all for us or whatever. Yeah.
In Brussels.
It sounds really sort of pompous, but it wasn't. Like, it was a real sort of community vibe. All of us would like get stuck in and, there would be rota, a bit of rota and all of that. Yeah, exactly. But I remember walking into the hall and there was a round of applause, like standing ovation.
Well done, mate.
Well done. Yeah.
Nice one, Laurence, you fucking idiot.
So that was a really cool experience. And also it's just fascinating. Like, it really is a Brussels bubble there. Like, and people love to exchange business cards. It's really odd.
Yeah, you need to get good
really
cards.
Weird. You need to need to be good at cards.
Or a QR code these days. You just get a tattoo of one of them. I've been thinking about doing that, so you can just scan me, and then you can go straight to the website. That's a great idea.
So that was it, really.
That's a super experience because we go through these historic sort of changes not very often, but I feel like we're going to go through a few of them in rapid succession now. We've opened up the door of a bit of chaos and activism, which is brilliant.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's been too easy for the two easies, isn't it? So Brussels, it's where stuff gets decided.
Yeah, and
Laurence,
beer, and chips.
They love their beer, don't they?
They love
it's
the
not
beer.
as good as British beer, though. Full
High
stop.
percentage, though.
Oh, mate, they want to smash you down. That's why we make such stupid decisions and vote to leave it. It's like we go over there, have a little chat with them on about 9.8% beer, get a bit floaty and go, oh, yeah, God, I can't handle this anymore. I'm voting out. I can't handle that. I prefer 4.1. I want to have 3 or 4 pints before I fall over. But yeah, Brussels, what an amazing sort of adventure at that particular time in history as well. You got to see that from that aspect, that lovely commune of that varied people, that inclusivity. Once you get to Hogwarts in Brussels, you've got your magic wand, your owl and your own bedroom and all that kind of stuff. But you still muck down together, you're still living it together, so you're getting to see what it is like, an opinion that's based in a historic baton passed down from their privilege or lack of privilege or whatever 100%. You want to have.
And exactly you said.
So that's the melting pot of decision making. That's what it's. That's what's so cool.
Like just big
thinking.
Big thinking, and the different cultures, nationalities, and obviously I met some really good friends there. But also just round the table, like dinner as well, just the British ignorance inside.
Well, speak for yourself,
Oh, come on. But literally, like some of it's these guys, like 4 to 5 languages. I'm just like...
Largely, everyone does speak English, so why waste your time learning something that you don't need to learn? Mate, I speak a little bit of quite a few languages. I love language, I love culture, I like having an open conversation. Sometimes it can be done by body language, just a strong connection. There's something deep inside of people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? We can play against each other in a sports field. You can make a vote of this, that and the other, and it doesn't really matter. To be honest, it doesn't really matter because we're still all got to move forward all together,
totally.
wherever there is no hard borders anywhere in a world that I live in. I'm going to refer to the way I see things. Even like having just a connected Europe in the sense of that's one block. There's another block. That's still polarised if you ask me. Take a spaceship, Elon Musk can probably sort you out, fly up a couple of miles, look back. Can you see any lines?
No.
Just one world, people. One world. And that's where we need to get to. One world. So we need to redefine what a connected world looks like.
But honestly, trust me though, it doesn't look like that when you're watching the football because at the same time, it was England against Iceland. So there was like one of me.
Made up as well.
Honestly,
they beat us, didn't they?
You should have seen the room. Yeah, unbelievable.
When
like
you could do without, when you just think that. I tell you what, that actually did make it feel like a bad decision.
It did.
It was like
no. And honestly, the amount of support Iceland had.
Every nation. To be fair though, I supported Iceland, and I was happy for them. No, but I was happy for them to beat us.
Yeah,
because
they deserved it.
No, not we deserved it. They deserved it.
Yeah,
because for pound, mate, the Icelandics are the hardest athletes on the planet, and it's probably because they derive from being Viking or something. they've had a bit more hardship, but they're so cool with their sport. So for the amount of people they in individual sports, team sports, they have such a great attitude. We could all learn something from that.
100%.
How can they be beating? They've got like the population. I don't even know. It's probably like one of our, Birmingham or somewhere like that. It's probably similar. It's a few million, isn't it? 4 million? 65 million here?
I'm sure, yeah.
And they thoroughly deserve to beat us.
Yeah, they did.
Well, it won't happen this time.
It won't.
We're going to win it.
Come on.
We're going to win it. This podcast has been recorded just before the Euros, and I woke up the other day. I was thinking about surfing, and then quickly I started thinking about football. And I'm so excited about it. We're going to win it. Until we've lost it, we're going to win it. And that's how you've got to be.
Hey there, it's Howie. Just interrupting really briefly, I've got a quick favour to ask. We don't run ads on the Pod Barber, but if you're finding this podcast helpful, or if you know someone who might benefit from listening to it, please take just 10 seconds to share this episode by tapping on those 3 little dots on your podcast player. From there, you can text or email a link to the show and spread the word of what we're trying to do here. That'd be great. Mick and I really appreciate your help. Okay, back to the show.
Basically, to stay focused, in and amongst being a haemophiliac, dealing with what sounds like severe anxiety at times, depression, the traumas, trying to sort of bury certain parts of that, but this sense of oneness within the household and extending that into the communities that are pouring back into you. When you've set your business up, you've moved from music, you've then gone to Brussels, you've had a great experience there. How have you maintained that level to have a kickstart your own business? Because you've got your own business.
Yeah.
Mention it.
Yeah, so it's called On the Pulse. It's my own consultancy that I set up in 2017. But I think what you just said there, Mick, I think it's really about trying to take that sort of like personal anger and turning that into like positive action. And I'm still learning to do that. Doesn't always happen. Do you know what I mean? And I think even when I was in like Brussels, for instance, and coming away from Brussels, and I actually did like a year's freelance work with a group called HemNet, and that's very much about nurse-led development and support. So it's really about educating the nurses and the wider multidisciplinary care team in haemophilia and bleeding disorders. So they do really great work, and I had the opportunity to sort of lead on patient engagement initiatives there. But it's that sort of learning process. I look back, there's some things that I did and said, in sort of conferences and things, I think, God, that was naive. Like, why did I talk like that? Why did I say that? But again, you reflect on it and then, you learn. Honestly, that whole professional development, I valued like every day. I was not getting the same satisfaction from what I was previously doing. And it is like, it's mad how that sort of journey, what that sort of journey's taken. But I think, I was in a position in 2017 where I was like, actually, I really need to distinguish here about what I'm doing within the space. It's still a small community, but in terms of the actual pharmaceutical world, there's a lot of sort of drug development going on. And I saw the opportunity to try to support the ecosystem and stakeholders to really prioritise education engagement, learning from my own past, but also anecdotally and then from the evidence base of actually what's going on in the community. So I really felt like whilst I'm not there, representing the patient voice, because that's what the main charities and patient groups are there for, who I wholly respect, I felt that even as one voice, I could still add something quite significant into that ecosystem. So that was really the impetus to set up the
driving force.
Yeah, 100%.
I wrote down as well, you don't have to be defined by what appears negative, because actually some of the biggest lessons are learned from the bad things. They're the
biggest lessons.
They're the biggest lessons.
They? Yeah.
And I feel like for a lot of us, so 2017, so you were 26, 27.
Yeah.
So mate, you're still a kid, really, and you bear the scars of stupidity, but you've moved into this world where you're dealing with people up to 70, 80, different professional levels on the ladder of understanding and lived experience.
Totally.
So it's great. You've got to be confident to open your mouth in the first place and to get involved. And that's what you're doing. And there's a lesson to be in that. If you've got a thought, if you've got a question, if you've got because it brings me back quickly to, what's haemophilia? And it's like a lot of people are too embarrassed to put themselves out there to even ask, because it's like we're not born knowing everything.
No, it's got
the whole point is the journey.
Yeah, 100%.
So
and I'll never be offended. I'm exactly the same still though. Particularly when I'm in the rare disease community, meeting some of these ultra rare disease. I mean, they're not expecting me to know exactly what.
No, but you've got to find out.
Yeah, and it's really important to stay open minded, isn't it?
And listen.
Yeah, totally. And I think that certainly supports other aspects of like sort of daily life, particularly like I said around accessibility. Even as something as simple as a disabled pass, for parking. And I think you can't judge people just because they're able to stand on their 2 feet, getting out there, getting out. You just do not know what's going on.
Well, when you've got your stormtrooper boot on, it's obvious. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it's a bit obvious.
When it's external like that, 100%. Yeah. I think when you, that sort of invisibility, I think, obviously, naturally people are quick to judge. And I make the same mistakes in other parts of my life, really quick to judge things, and you just have to, I think there was one particular instance I remember at one of these they call them like a round table event where obviously multiple stakeholders get together. And this was actually at the European Parliament, and it was related to haemophilia and bleeding disorders. And I think to my mind, it was talking about, musculoskeletal care and again, physio services. And I remember I took the mic and I just started speaking about myself. And I was like, I was talking about my joints and what it had taken time. There's guys in the room that don't even get access to treatment. And that was like, and I remember there's a gentleman in the community, Brian Amani, and he's a real leader, advocacy leader. And he's been incredibly supportive personally and professionally with me. And I remember him saying to me, sort of jokey, but there was a lesson there in the after drinks. He was like, why are you talking about your joint, why are you talking about all your joint problems? And I think it was that point around, this is about the collective. Use your individual experience and your insight.
Relatability.
But this is about the collective action, and again, you've got peers in that room that have no level of, it's all relative. And I always struggle with that argument. It's about like, what can we learn from what we're doing here to go and support our brothers elsewhere? But, it's still obviously being cognizant to the fact that the level of care we receive in the UK is still, compared to particularly Eastern Europe and, Sub-Saharan Africa, it's unreal really. So
but why shouldn't it be better anyway?
No, and that's what I'm saying. It shouldn't stop there. And as I said, Nick, there's still people today who are being suboptimally treated. For haemophilia treatment, I think it was in the early noughties, the treatment centres were procuring treatment at different price points. So they centralised the process to essentially, manage costs and make the whole process cheaper. I think it's worked. It's a success story in the sense that today I think we have one of the cheapest factor products for people living with haemophilia in the world. The challenge is that doesn't necessarily support innovation, because when new treatments come along,
it's expensive.
They're expensive. And obviously it's very multifaceted, there's various arguments to that, but it just speaks to that idea that today, with the tender process, 75% of product choice is based on cost alone.
That's
rather than effectiveness.
Obviously, that's the first sentence that gets mentioned, and it's about I suppose, we can relate this to the environment, for instance, just because everything's so relatable to me. So to look after the environment, to have electric cars, to have lithium batteries, we have to expose the fact that it's the harvesting of that material. There's a cost to it. There's a detrimental cost to it, to society, to the environment at the time. But you have to then weigh that up and see, is it worth using yesteryear's advance to manoeuvre to tomorrow's future?
Better world, yeah.
So there is always a transition period, but you then can't look with this short-termism.
No.
The bit in the middle, the 10 to 24, is the short-termism. So that is basically what happens. You get into that middle bit and you'll have someone who's stuck on their ways going, but the argument is that this is the cost and this is what it is and this is going to cost so much. Yeah, but if you bring that across the board, it's going to come down in price. And then that old technology, which is worse for the environment, worse for the patient, we can move away from that.
Yeah.
There comes the word hope. There's hope that things can get better, and that then drops through every single angle of life.
Yeah, it's hope.
So you can then manoeuvre that forward. So there is always hope if you're suffering in different countries, because there's people that listen in different countries. So there'll be groups of people who are suffering from haemophilia that will listen in another country about this, and they'll think, oh, we're so... why don't we have the same privilege? Why haven't we got the same access? Well, we're going to fight bloody hard for you.
Totally. And I think, I'd totally hold my hand up, Mick. I've done...
You are going to fight hard for them, aren't you?
I'd hold my hand up. I've never done any... I've contributed to humanitarian aid in a fiscal way, but I haven't actually contributed it in a personal way, being on the ground. And I think that's still a part of my my life and career objective.
Your mission
is to go and visit peers in a developing country. You see some of the advocacy that's going on in those countries with limited resources, and it's incredible the work that they can do, so...
Also, when we look at particularly Africa or somewhere like that, they don't have to borrow the crappy infrastructure from yesteryear like we do. So everyone moans about potholes and stuff like that, but it's because we're piling over old Victorian technologies and stuff like that, whereas they've all sped up. They've all got internet banking straight away, whereas people are like, oh mate, I want to still pay in cash and physical, yeah. So there's an opportunity that their cost of their buy-in should be further along.
Yeah.
If there's the nuance that spreads, and it should be that we should look from the 2 miles above at the one world, because I think visually seeing that will help. And then the people like Laurence Woollard, who is 31 years now, but in another 10 years, I forget the name of the guy that treated
Mark
you.
Patterson, yeah.
What a man he sounds like.
Yeah.
You're going to be that geezer.
I really appreciate that, Meg. And I think that analogy is really nice, actually. It has been used where you talk about that skipping of technology. And, they've used examples like mobile technology, for instance. You said skipping to, going away from landline, go to mobile phone. And they're actually speaking about that very much as a part of the debate and related to gene and cell-based technologies of, for developing and emerging nations, you need a level of infrastructure in place in order to prescribe and distribute and obviously treat people living with haemophilia and other bleeding disorders across big geographies and different challenging locations to reach. You need really important infrastructure. Actually, there's the potential of bringing an intervention in where it's a one-time therapy for a certain period of time that would remove the necessity for all of that infrastructure. Yep. So it's great you brought that analogy up, because that certainly is being applied in
Let's
health.
Also make sure that we're all looking after waste of money, waste of stuff, waste of energies, because let's face it, me and you are drinking water. So let's not beat around the bush. There are a lot of countries, a lot of people in the world who simply don't have the energy to fight for these rarer diseases within their own communities, these rarer opportunities, because they're fighting. Fighting for fresh
bigger
water.
Priorities,
fighting.
100%.
So we all need to up speed.
But I think you made the point earlier, though, like it is relative. And as you said, that shouldn't mean that you can't fight for better. And you can't demand more here where,
if we have it better here, we can lend it down further afield.
You can use it as, I think, certainly
energy.
You use it as,
awareness.
You use it as, a demonstration of what can be achieved.
Exactly.
And
nothing's perfect. It's never going to be perfect. But if we practice, we'll make some progress.
Love it, Mick.
I love saying that. I can't help myself championing the chat. There is still like widespread stigma regarding haemophilia, AIDS, homosexuals. So we're here, we're demystifying it as we rock it out. Your grandparents' story is absolutely vital in that, with the blood inquiry, the scandal that's going on.
Yeah.
I want to move into that. I want to understand what happened to your grandparents. What's that story? Please tell me about that.
Yeah, and I appreciate it, Mick. And, you know, obviously, like I said earlier, I'm really close to my mum, and obviously she gave me the permission very early on in my sort of advocacy work to be able to kind of, you know, make it public and speak about it as a part of my work. But so it's, yeah, so for certainly for those that might not know, there's currently an ongoing public inquiry going on related to infected blood products in the UK. It's into its kind of fourth year now, so they're expecting the report to be published next year. So, and a lot of people, Mick, for years, they've been campaigning for answers, you know, and they've been campaigning for justice, and it's been a long time coming. But the first place to start is really thinking about the treatment evolution. So people like my granddad, for instance, for about 3/4 of his life, he probably really didn't have any real feasible treatment. In the early 60s, they discovered something called cryoprecipitate, which is quite rich in the clotting protein. But that would be those, you know, typical sort of bags, you know, would be administered in hospital over several hours. And that came with its own complications. But that was donated through one person giving their blood. In the 70s, they started commercialising lyophilized, essentially freeze-dried clotting factor. And that was on a big scale. You know, this is really where pharmaceutical companies started getting, you know, more involved. And you can imagine that going from cryoprecipitate, which was one donor, to what they would call these lots, where you could have up to as many as 30,000 donors producing hundreds, potentially thousands of vials of treatment. So if one person had a bloodborne virus, that would make all 30,000.
Because it was all just mixed into one part.
So when we had the advent of freeze-dried concentrates, there's no denying that, and obviously I wasn't alive then, so I'm very much speaking to the evidence base, and obviously people in the community that I meet and speaking with my mum around, you know, my granddad's experiences. When those clotting concentrates became available, it made a massive change because it was the first time people living with haemophilia could treat from home. It gave a sense of freedom that the likes of my granddad never had in their lives. Again, they could be out, and without that level of treatment protection, they were always prone to bleeding, wherever my granddad went, work, whatever it might have been. Whereas they finally had a product that was fairly easy compared to what they were doing, fairly easier to use, and provided them the necessary coverage to start living a more fulfilling life and have more freedom and independence in their life. So it was massive. And they also introduced home treatment delivery programs. So again, big changes in the way that care was delivered. The challenge was that they knew, or as the inquiry is discovering, they were aware that there was a risk of hepatitis infection through the blood pool. And they were aware of that. And I think the argument was that they took that as a part of the sort of benefit risk, that there was greater benefit to using this product than not, even with that risk of hepatitis infection. Whether or not the level of that risk was disclosed to the patient population through clinicians at the time is a part of what the inquiry is trying to find out. I think the challenge was in 1982, there was the first reported case of HIV of someone living with haemophilia. So obviously, and certainly what I don't want to do is preempt what obviously inquiry is finding out, and obviously I've done a bit of writing and I've shared that with you about it. But certainly what I would add there is that obviously we didn't have digital technologies like we do today. At the inquiry, for instance, where I've been there in person, obviously watching virtually, a lot of it is all written form, letters, and exchanges between different stakeholders and clinicians. So there was a period of time that was sort of that discovery phase and exchange that took a while to understand what was going on in America and obviously the rest of the world.
Can I just quickly ask?
Yeah, please.
Obviously, the initial treatment was
cryoprecipitate. Yeah,
that one. And then out of the lots of the 30,000 donors, Where could that have come from? Was it
Right.
UK based, or was it American over here?
Fantastic question. Thank you. And that's a big part of the story. So what happened was that there was lots of campaigning in the UK to have a self-sufficient blood supply. Mm-hmm. And there was a gentleman called Lord David Owen who, whilst he was in government as health minister, he was a big advocate of that. I think when he left government in the late 70s, they completely changed tact. And rather than funding self-sufficiency through UK blood supply, whereby donors were not being paid, so it was voluntarily, and it was still, it was deemed a safer alternative, they imported the blood product from America. And I think the challenge there is that they had a system, still do have a system, of paid donor. And a lot of those donors would be coming, they use the term, quote unquote, the skid row. They could either be drug addicts, prostitutes. There was a World in Action documentary in 1975 that reported on what was happening. Wow. And it's dark. It's a dark episode, and they showed it at the inquiry. So obviously I'm trying to put myself in my granddad's position at the time, where they've been given this product. It's enabled a sense of freedom that they've never had before. It's very difficult to understand the type of conversations that were ongoing at the time. I think what we're learning through the inquiry is, for some physicians, obviously we're in a time of paternalism, that paternalistic approach, that hierarchy.
Just quickly,
please,
because some people might not even understand the word paternalism. Yeah. So just quickly explain what that is.
Yeah, so I think that was very much of the sort of culture of the time, whereby it was very much about doctor knows best. And I think there was a lot of trust and faith there from the patients in their physicians. Okay. There's some quite strong literature whereby talking about coercion, where you sort of merge into coercion, whereby you're threatening people's autonomy because of that paternalist, that dominant approach of, I'm going to tell you what to do.
Paternalistic treatment.
And I'm not going to offer you the space to have your say because I know what's best for you.
Yeah.
So that was really embedded in the culture of healthcare practice.
It was borrowed.
Overall.
It'd come down the line.
Healthcare practice, yeah. So obviously, again, putting myself in my granddad's shoes, you've got this new treatment, and again, we don't really know what was disclosed at the time and about what the patient population were made aware of. And again, that's coming through the inquiry, and I wouldn't want to suggest otherwise. But obviously, with this first case in 1982, it became a real concern. And for my, if I just turn it personally, the diagnostics for HIV became available in 1984. So both my granddad and my grandmother were both diagnosed in 1984. So granddad had obviously contracted HIV through the products he was using. And then obviously, my nan being in a relationship, in a sexual relationship, nan had contracted it through granddad. So what's quite remarkable from that is that they didn't actually tell my mum. And my mum and my uncle, so my mum's brother, they didn't actually tell them because I think they were worried, particularly one, I think at the time, because of the stigma and discrimination that was going on around HIV and AIDS. And obviously that's been really brought through in the It's a Sin documentary.
Yeah.
For people like myself who weren't living through that time.
Yeah, it's really helpful to have that.
Totally. And obviously I've watched different documentaries, around HIV as well, and it's fantastic. It's fascinating to hear from people who are living at the time, and obviously, friends and family of those that we've lost. But I think they took the decision that they didn't want to tell them, more out of, not to cause my mum, who obviously was giving birth to Andrew in 1985.
Was she like mid-20s?
Yeah, mid-20s. Yeah. And my uncle, was a bit older, but, in the sort of same scenario, I think he was trying to, get on with his career and everything. So they kept it secret. And then my granddad sadly passed away in 1987. So I was born in 89, so I obviously didn't get to meet him. But, through sitting with my mum over the past couple of years and writing her statement, which was 11,500 words. Honestly, it was like a dissertation. Went to some really dark places and things that I found out that I never knew. And, it was tragic that my mum would lose her dad at such an early age as a result of something that wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault that he had contracted HIV through the blood supply. Decisions were made or not made at the time that meant that happened. And obviously, again, if I recall correctly from the literature, by 1985, over 50% of people living with haemophilia in the UK were HIV positive. And there was a near near 100% risk of hepatitis C infection. So at the time it was non-A, non-B, that you started getting cases of liver cirrhosis, and then they, defined it as hepatitis C. So
at what point in history were they able to treat HIV and AIDS?
Yeah, so I think when Grandad died in 1987, there was no treatment for it.
Okay, they still hadn't worked that out.
My nan, unbelievably, and I think this also speaks to the Newman spirit, so that was my mum's maiden name. It speaks to Newman spirit. She survived until 2003 when she was 73. Like, unbelievable to know what she went through, and something we put in the statement around her horse pills. Like, I even remember it now, Mick, going to visit her in Billericay at a bungalow. She used to have so many pills. Like, unreal, so many, and used to take them numerous times in the day. We never knew what it was for. We were never told. So, but it was 1987 when Grandad passed that Nan had told my mum, actually on the day that my Grandad died. And then I think there was a course of treatment that came on stream, but it had significant and severe consequences, in terms of illness and other complications. I think from our understanding, it's very difficult because the treatment records are no longer available. For some people in the community,
Why are they not available?
Well, this is it. And, for some people in the community, and again, what the inquiry is trying to find out is, there's a lot of mistrust in government.
Funny that.
Around what they did with, with the health records. For some people, believe it or not, that people who have survived today, even in them, what we've heard this through the inquiry, in their health records, they've got a significant gap between the sort of early 80s to
they covered it up, they erased it.
So it's again, that's why the inquiry's then. That's why people activists campaign so hard to get it. But I think I think it's just quite hard really to put into words. When I listen to Mum and the experiences of particularly Nan being widowed, and she was only in her 50s, being widowed. And obviously living with the condition herself at that time where there was sort of heightened stigma and discrimination, the implications for her in terms of her employment, she was really reluctant to... A trust was set up in 1990 by the government and funded through the government to provide ex gratia payments. So the word compensation was never used. It was ex gratia payments.
Although it has been recently used, which basically is culpable.
Right.
We're admitting it.
Yeah, and it was the first statement recently where they actually used compensation. But I think what was like mad when you reflect on it, that and we have the copy of it from my nan, that people who had survived and either were living with, HIV or hepatitis C or bereaved families and partners, they were forced to sign a letter basically saying that they would not take action against the government in order to receive the ex gratia money.
Wow.
So they basically just held the whole community at sort of ransom, really, to say, if you want your money. Unbelievable. So, yeah, I mean, again, Mick, spend all day on it. Like, it's a really deep story, and I think obviously what I'd certainly say to anyone listening, obviously go and look at the Infected Blood Enquiry, and I think we've got in July there will be the ministers of the time speaking, and a lot of people have been anticipating this, because what we've heard from, it started with, and this is something the head of the inquiry, Sir Brian Longstaff, has promoted from the beginning, that people would be at the heart of the inquiry. That we heard from, people infected and affected at the start. We've heard from clinicians of the time and nurses of the time and other multidisciplinary care staff of the time. We've heard about ethics, and sort of other aspects. And now, this summer we're actually going to hear from some of the people who were making those decisions that ultimately all come back to cost, really, and again, why certain decisions were made or not made to protect people. So.
I really hope that there is a sense of trust in the fact that people would desire the truth as opposed to the passing of some accountability. Person to person, I want to hear some sentiment on that, because it's not always what you do on the day, it's what you do the day after.
Yeah, totally.
They can't give you your family back.
No, totally. But
they can give you the bloody truth. They can give you the true sentiment that with time, with oversight, it's one of the biggest, most incredible letdowns that they've had in their own professional career. And they should be now coming here as part of a system to help activate better non-paternalistic medical treatments, because of we can see the cost to life.
100%.
We're all paying for this inquiry, by the way.
Yes, yeah. And the last accounts from what I saw, it was 68 million.
Yeah, we're still paying.
But that, it was actually thanks to a Labour MP in Hull called Diana Johnson, who's been head of the all-party parliamentary group for haemophilia and contaminated blood. She advocated a lot to get the inquiry.
Good.
Andy Burnham came on board. And
Good.
actually, I was fortunately invited to a meeting where I was with Andy Burnham at the time, because he'd obviously been behind the Hillsborough inquiry. And I know there's been challenges there, but he really added a voice to the debate. And actually, it was Theresa May who announced the inquiry. And I think that came at a time where her political situation was very unstable. So it's funny, isn't it, how certain things have to be in place.
Yeah,
for
the timing.
The timing is critical.
The timeline,
critical. But just, again, fortunate to have met some of these families by going to the inquiry myself, and obviously through the community, but lives destroyed,
Suboptimal care still.
Literally. And I think,
still,
and that,
to this day.
And that's it. That's what you have to reflect on. Like 40 years on from that, there's still practices today that should not be happening. And, we see that around forced treatment switching. And that's, taking away people's choice.
Yeah.
Of what is going to be best for them, taking that away because of cost.
I think that raises a really important point. Actually, patients, they don't want a passive treatment, because we've now got digital
as a means of empowerment. 100%.
So we go to the doctor for a 10-minute appointment, and in all honesty, the culture has changed so much that you're better off doing your own homework. There was a period of time where they naturally were like, no, don't go and Google it, don't do this. But guess what? They're just a doctor of a broad spectrum of things. So definitely Google it, definitely look into it, definitely dive deeper into what you think that you might have. Reach out to businesses like Laurence runs.
It isn't just words. Like, it has to be a partnership with the healthcare professionals. They add something really significant as a part of that overall discussion around your care. I think, as I'm a big advocate for people being supported to develop the skills and capacity to advocate for themselves, because there's influences. There's influences from the health system side that necessarily can't always be helped, but that is potentially playing into that conversation around why you might be told about one product over another, or whatever it might be. So it's really important, isn't it, for people to be able to self-advocate for their own needs.
Yeah.
That starts with identifying your clinical needs. So you need education there. All starts with education.
Yeah.
But it has to be a partnership there, and I think it's important that as as a patient, as an individual, you offer each other space, isn't it? Because I rely on their expertise, but also they rely on your expertise as someone living with the condition to help guide that process. So
the cure is in the conversation.
Yeah, 100%.
Got to have it open.
100%. And it's really fascinating, actually, Mick. Like, I know we've kind of gone on a tangent from the inquiry, but it relates. It's all about ethics and informed consent. People like my granddad were not necessarily consented to what was the treatment that they were given to them, because they weren't fully aware of all the facts.
Well, also, to talk about it from back then, we've still got paternalistic
still in the system.
coercion,
100%.
because some of the doctors, some of the people, some of the ministers, they still sit at the back benches or still with massive influence. Now, I think taken from yesteryear is a brilliant attitude to have. Learn from our elders and their wisdoms, but the corruption gets passed through as well, and the unaccountability. So, let's face it, certainly within politics, I think we can all see these days that they're lobbying against certain things because of their own personal interests at levels of pharmaceutical world. So nothing happens without the sun coming up, someone buying and selling some wheat, us eating breakfast, people buying into medicines or treatments, people selling them. So there's always going to be a level of pressure put onto people at those mid-stage levels to try and advocate for what's best for the system as opposed to the grassroots patient.
But I mean, and just to add there, I think that, obviously regulations change. There's huge compliance now in terms of how the pharmaceutical industry work. And, for full transparency, Mick, as a consultancy, I work with, pharma clients around that sort of prioritisation of education as a part of their overall strategy. And there's some incredible people who are genuinely committed.
Yeah.
But at the end, we recognise, don't we? And obviously me as a business, of course there's a profit motive there. But that's not to say that you can't help shift and shape that strategy to ensure that whatever the output is, non-medical, that it actually has genuine benefit and impact to people like myself at that grassroots community level. I also would say is that, just in terms of the inquiry, I think probably the most surrealist experience that I've probably had ever is actually hearing my granddad's consultant give evidence. And that was a real surreal, with my mum, that was like a real surreal time, actually hearing sort of from the horse's mouth, as it were, and some of the evidence that was given, to kind of understand and get a better idea of how your own sort of family members were treated or not treated.
How did you relate to that when you heard that, that particular sort of impression given by the medical professional who was dealing out the treatment?
Mick, I was out for lunch with him 2 years ago. He was a consultant for me and my brothers in our paediatric years. So it'd gone down the family, and every time we used to see him, he'd always ask how mum was. He would always ask how Nan was when she was alive. He used to come out on activity days as a part of the centre, running these sort of holistic events.
So one of the good guys that had to band out something that was inappropriate, in reflection, does he hold himself partly responsible from that inquiry? Are you allowed to say that even? Or
No, well, so and again, speaking from my own viewpoint, he was a part of the problem. And he is accountable for what happened to the likes of my granddad, and in a big way.
Does he see that himself?
No, I don't think so. And he was, and I think and again, I'm speaking in a personal capacity, removing the whole profession here. He lied under oath.
Wow.
And, and that was just demonstrated through the evidence that was being shown on screen at the time, and about how he was still supplying non-heat treated products, so infected products, as late as 1985.
Wow. We see this in inquiries happen with lots of different things. This is somewhat probably more blurred to most people's idea of the inquiries, but it's so explosive.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And I think
it's probably one of the bigger ones, realistically, because it covers so many bases.
And the worst, the contaminated blood crisis has been defined as the worst NHS crisis in its history.
Because
the amount of people that have died, the amount of people that have been infected
lived
and affected
in a suboptimal way.
Yeah, 100%.
The continuum, the legacy of it is absolutely
totally
horrendous,
massive.
And it will taint the future of generations to come.
Yeah, and because it goes down in the family.
Yeah.
Like, as you're seeing now, you're seeing witness to that, what the impact that has. Me and my brothers didn't have our granddad. Mum didn't have granddad's lived experience of support when we were young. Massive implications. And I think that it is, I know, we have to be careful, I think, sometimes about how the media go about representing inquiries, because like you brought up, the cost to taxpayers, that's always part of that.
I think if anything, the reason I would always mention something like that myself is because, if someone lacks a little bit of empathy or compassion, and it's all right, I'm all right, Jack, so fuck the rest of them kind of attitude. Well, actually, we're all affected by it, even if it's, by the way of how our money is being distributed back into society to clear up the mess of yesteryear.
Yeah, and that's,
so actually that might prick the ears up. That's all I. The reason
I
I
agree.
mention it.
And
totally, the thing is,
yeah.
if you think, well, I'm quite happy to chip in some of my taxes for better treatment because you feel now that we've learned more about haemophilia,
consequences like that aren't going to happen later, are they?
Yeah, exactly. I mean? So we've got more effective and sustainable use of public funding.
Yeah, totally.
But guess who is clearing up out of the 68 million? Guess who? Let's have a think. Yeah, I think you all know, don't you? There's a certain group of people that are profiteering off the back of their own shite. And that's the truth of it. I'm allowed to say what I like, so I'll say that.
Certainly what I'd add there, Mick, is that I think what it has caused, though, is, and we see that in terms of treatment evolution today, and it's a good point, and there's still lines there, but of how the different stakeholders, so pharma, healthcare professionals, patients, patient advocacy groups, policymakers, other people representative of that ecosystem do come together. And I'm not just saying that.
No.
I see that in my work, and it's mad. Like would haemophilia care today, albeit, like I said, we could talk for hours about the challenges and the opportunities. It would not be where it is here in the UK and other international developed markets without that like cohesion and collaboration.
Build a box.
Do you know what I mean?
Build a box, all square angles, and put all of those people in it. You only need one bent screw.
Love it.
Done. So we've got bent screws out there and we're looking at you. We're putting magnifying glasses over you as you speak. It's called an inquiry and you're going to be held accountable, people. So look forward to that as well. Because you should be. USA, prisons, they were Skid Row. What on earth are we transplanting terrible treatments or ideas from procedures that have less adequate ideals around patient positive treatment? And we could see that, and we could talk about like the Brexit scenario here as well, because actually in different places there is a different attitude towards it. We had it with the horse meat scandal and everything like that. There's always a scandal. There's always someone trying to just nick in under there and just use their power of pressure and knowing eventually that, oh yeah, it's going to get done in an inquiry. Well, never mind. I'll invest in the local law firm. I'll have my extra money in there. So I'll just, whatever happens, I'm going to be all right at that level. And that is really what I see as an obvious blind opener. I don't have a problem with people at the same time having a champion over the good guys from within all of these forces, because that, you know, you've got into this business, you want to be successful, and that means a monetary return so you can afford this lovely home with your future wife. Brilliant, made up for you. But you're trying to do it from a position of something beneficial for the end users. And in another 10 or 20 years' time, I know that somebody like you is going to be able to look back and go, yeah, I remember doing a podcast with the Pod Barber. And, you know, actually it was really fundamental. It was a flag in the dirt. And we were able to move on. And we did hit some of those targets that we set on fire on that day, and so on and so on. And there is loads of good people out there in politics, in pharma, in everything. We need to shine the light on those dudes,
definitely.
More importantly,
Yeah,
and celebrate those successes and celebrate those wins and victories to save on accidentally just keep on funneling money.
But this is where, Nick, I appreciate that in terms of your perspective around the consultancy. You know, I like to think as well, you know, ultimately it's for social purpose, but I'm always open to being challenged, like I have previously from other peers and professionals, always open to be challenged around my practice as a consultant and as the company. But, you know, what you really referred to there, and I think the importance of that sort of community critical consciousness, this consciousness raising, if people aren't aware of those system approaches, isn't it? And you know, they won't be able to recognise, actually, this is injustice in what, you know, if it's the healthcare system or social injustice, what can I do about it to change the circumstances for myself, but also my peers and my community? And that's where education comes in. And that's where the opportunity for education has to happen, you know, that enablement process.
How proud are you of your family's attitude and the activism?
Yeah, it's a really lovely question. Yeah, really proud. And, you know, my brother's... I shared a photo of my brother, you know, recently. You know, he was on a march, a Palestinian march, you know, with the latest issue in between Israel and Palestine. So, and, you know, Johnny, he stands up and speaks for ideals and aspects that he feels are really, really important. I love seeing him when he does that. But also just, like I certainly wouldn't be where I am in terms of myself as a person, but also the consultancy without my parents. Unbelievable. Like my mum is my biggest asset. She's an incredible woman. And, you know, I do a lot of my writing with her, and her experience as a caregiver, that love and care that you just can't get from any freelancer, you know?
Yeah.
You know, mum's still saying, when am I going to get paid? And I say, Mum, I pay you back in love, you know, and emptying the dishwasher, and which I should be doing regardless, living under their roof. But she's an incredible woman, and just that fighting spirit. She's 63, but, you know, I'm so fortunate she's alive.
She's full of it.
Yeah. And to see the inquiry, for mum to see justice in action. And hopefully, although we've already got part of the truth, like for her to hopefully be given the whole truth about losing her parents, that for me, that'd be of immense pride and satisfaction, I think. So
yeah.
The problem with the inquiry is that it is 30 years too late, because many of these physicians have died. So they'll never be held to account for what they've done.
Their name should be there.
But their names are 100%.
Right. The old curveball question, my friend. Sex, drugs and rock and roll, baby.
Love it.
So you can pick one of those or all of them. Whatever you like, my man.
Oh, man. Do we get 2 or only 1?
You can have all 3. To be fair, I throw it like that, but I kind of like it if you can get them all linked together somehow.
Because we're like so pressed on time, I'll do 2. I think the rock and roll side, obviously because I studied music and I was really committed, in terms of my drum playing. I had the opportunity to play with the guitarist of Reef. He was awesome, and I played with him for like a year and a half. So I really enjoyed that. That was like, again, a real coming of age time. I was also, Mick, like taught by a guy in Romford. So he was like one of the leading drum tutors in the country. And it took me a year to get the call from his wife to say, you've got a spot. And I remember I was in Brighton at the time and I had to travel back to Romford, and he had his studio in like a music shop in Romford High Street. And Bob at the time was like in his 70s. And I remember walking in for the first time and he had like these golden drumsticks on the wall in commemoration of Bob Armstrong from like one of the big drum companies and things. And I'd heard a lot of stories about him, but like sadly he's passed away now, but you wouldn't go to someone like Bob if you weren't serious. Mm-hmm. And I was living on campus at the time, right? And you can imagine I wanted to make the most of university, both personally and academically. So I wasn't prioritising too well at the time about what was really important to me. So I turned up to practice one day and I hadn't practiced. And I remember he sat me down and there was this bass tune that I had to practice to. And it was like literally the fundamentals of jazz. So the bass started to play the tune. It's like a doo-dum, dum, dum. I still remember it today. And I go, along, shit, along, and then the snare would come in and like literally the first 4 bars, he just turned the music off. He just walked out, just slammed the door shut. And I remember him coming in and he just lost his shit with me. And damn right, because I was stopping someone else having that opportunity, regardless of whether I was paying or not. That was a massive learning, actually, because the next time I came in, I said, that's it. I'm done. Like, I can't do this anymore. Yeah. And that was, making that decision, isn't it? Of like, I obviously have not committed myself enough to make this successful. So that was massive. But also just on the sex side, I definitely want to raise this. Like, it's quite important, actually. So, and unfortunately, it is a little bit serious, but culture is a massive problem, isn't it? For us Brits to talk about sex and the education around sex. And personally speaking, it wasn't very good in school. So a lot of it was experiential. But I once spoke to a nurse, actually, who she called me up because she had a 14-year-old who had come in with a psoas bleed. And psoas bleeds are probably one of the worst bleeds you can experience. Fortunately, touch wood, I haven't myself. But obviously I know guys in the community. And I don't know how to describe it, but it's like inside the hip, basically. Mm-hmm. And they'd had a 14-year-old come in with a psoas bleed. Basically, she was obviously a really good nurse, and he hadn't disclosed the real reason for what happened, but she had basically identified that it was through sex, through sexual intercourse. And she was asking me, like, have you got any recommendations, in terms of sort of support for him? Because I'm sort of struggling to really get through to him at the moment. And that was, again, a big learning for me, really. And I sort of think back to my own time about, for a young guy like that, clearly he hadn't really considered the implications of doing what he was doing without the necessary cover, the necessary treatment, for instance, and that real kind of self-care and self-management. And again, the responsibility for a 14-year-old, he just wants to go out and party. Regardless of the fact that he was underage, quote unquote, actually, besides the point, someone like that needs support, because otherwise he's causing himself harm when he doesn't need to. So again, that was a big lesson for me, actually. Again, where's the intervention there? Whatever that may be.
I think with the first part of the story, you touched on it. If you're going to invest any time, make sure you're not wasting someone's time. If you decide to take someone's time, make sure that it's valued to them and to you. And also in the educational sense, let's make sure we put time into every factor of life, particularly at sex education, because it's so important.
Yeah.
Dude, I've absolutely loved having you here today.
Me too, Mick. It's been awesome.
You are such a beacon of positivity. We've all learned so deeply, so connectively about such serious matters. If there was one thing that some people that maybe touch in and maybe want to follow your consultancy, could you just tell me how they can get in contact with you for rare diseases, because you do a lot of work for this and a lot of writing. Could you just list that for me?
Yeah, thanks, Mick. So I'm most active on Twitter, so the handle's @thewoolard, and then my consultancy is on thepulseconsultancy.com, and there's actually a blog page there where we've been reporting on some of the kind of most recent articles and output. So it would be great. And obviously in as a part of that includes, the Infected Blood Enquiry. So I really hope, people listening, are able to go and check that out and obviously, be able to kind of tune into the inquiry itself and get behind it, because it's really, really important for many people.
On that note, peace, love, and power to your day, man.
Thanks so much, Mick.
The Pod Barber is a That Media and Design production, with Mickey at the mic and Howie at the controls. If you've been affected by any of the topics in this show, you can find more helpful information on the episode's page at thepodbarber.com and search The Pod Barber on social and let's get connected.